Hello there. Welcome to Ready Academy's latest presentation in its management series, this one on how to respectfully say no. It's how to challenge or counter the boss. Sometimes it's necessary to be able to say no, and doing it the right way can make all the difference between success with your activity or operation, or possibly even getting terminated. So let's look at a couple definitions before we begin, just for a little bit of fun here. Yes man. So a yes man or yes men are a weak individual who agrees with their political leader or superior at work at all occasions. Absolutely zero chance of saying no. Sycophant. Person who acts I have trouble with this one, obsequiously towards someone important in order to gain advantage. Because he's high ranking, he's surrounded by sycophants. You see this with like the TV program Entourage, where people are always surrounded saying how great they are, what they do is great, do more, yes, yes, yes. This is what led to MC Hammer blowing through millions of dollars in 1 year and being broke the following year. Suddenly his sycophants disappeared. And then toady. Toady is fun because it goes back to the days of a 19th century term. It's a contraction of toad eater, where a con man would go into town. And of course, everyone believed in the town that toads or tomatoes or other things were poisonous. And he had a cure-all that would fix it. The way that he would demonstrate it is he would have his toad eater eat a toad and then administer his cure-all. And he would show, look, the man's not dying. And therefore, you should all buy my cure-all that'll cure everything from common cold to the sneezes to tomato eating, tomato poisoning, what have you. And this is, like I say, back to the days of con artists. We don't see it much anymore. A little bit of food for thought, though, if you're a leader. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. What you want to do as a leader is not surround yourself with people that will be yes men, or surround yourself with people that will always give you the answer that you want to hear. You want people that are better than you or cover off areas of knowledge and skills that you don't have. They should complement your skill set. And then in the end result is you as the leader make the final decision. That's the burden of leadership. But you draw upon the knowledge and expertise of all those around you that complement your knowledge base and skill set. So let's talk about the objective. History, literature, popular culture, and real life are filled with examples where yes men have eventually led to disaster. It may be not a failing of people being too willing to say yes. Concurrence with a plan can be a good thing, get everyone on the same page and you all move forward as a team. But failure of knowing how to say no when it's appropriate, and in some cases, no is just asking, what if? Or have you considered X? Or does anyone else see a problem here? And as long as you can ask those questions, then maybe you can shore up the plan even better. So how should you raise challenges and concerns or outright refusal respectfully to the boss? And respectfully, I think, is a key word here. It really is important, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So I'll be your presenter. I'm Steve Holton. I'm a retired Army captain with some time in the infantry and in the Signals Corps. Signals being land communications, or the IT component of the military. I've been an independent management consultant for about 25 years since getting out of the military. And Missy is my partner in crime. We have a video on YouTube for Service Dog Essentials, and we also have an upcoming course on Ready Academy that talks about working dogs and how you can use them to help you with your day-to-day activities. I must ask you to excuse my voice. I don't normally have that sort of 10-pack a day smoking voice, but unfortunately it's been a little rough. I've been coughing for a few days now, and it's leaving me a little rough for this presentation. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to talk about a few real personal examples of having to say no and how I approached it. These come from both the military and from industry. And the question is, how would you disagree with Dad? That's probably the best philosophy for thinking about how to approach this. In the military days, the colonel had given me an order to release some equipment to one of our reserve units. And the idea was that they would train on it throughout the year. And then if we needed it for deployment, we would take it back. But otherwise, they would hold on to it and maintain it. A good idea in principle, but the problem is the reserves are not exactly well known for taking the best care of their equipment. And it's not because of inability, it's mostly due to time and number of people and the fact that each person only gets a short amount of time on it. So once again, things slip through the cracks. So I went to the colonel and politely asked if he would entertain a discussion about his latest direction and why I had concerns. And as a squadron commander, I'd like to offer an alternate suggestion or approach. So he agreed to give me 5 minutes, at which time I said, basically, look, we'll go up with the equipment ourselves. We'll train with the reservists. We'll help them maintain it. We'll take it back to us, take it back at the end of the day or end of the week. And we would just continue doing this. And then over time, the equipment would continuously be maintained and they would get better training because we would cross-train with them. He did agree and rejected the plan and said he wanted them to have it because he felt they were professional enough to maintain it even on a part-time schedule. After a year, we discovered, because ultimately the colonel's direction took precedence, so we said, okay, very good, sir. He said no, so we gave the equipment over, and we discovered a year later, of course, that it was completely unusable and had to be rebuilt from scratch. These things happen, and it's not something that I dance around I'm happy about, but he wanted to try something new, and we did. That said, like I say, a year later, we had to bring all the equipment home and keep it because it wasn't usable in its current state. Similarly, in industry, we were working on a proposal, and the customer had neglected a few key components in his statement of work that would have been necessary to make his design or plan or request work. Because it was missed, it meant that the solution was underscoped, and we could, in fact, charge less for the solution as asked for because it wasn't complete. And a number of other vendors ran with that and carried on with the underscope solution. I suggested that we not do that because it was immoral to provide the solution as asked for when there was clearly an error in it and that it was underbidding for what the customer needed. We debated it. My boss wanted to continue going forward as planned just because he wanted to match apples to apples with the other vendors. But ultimately, we came to an agreement that no, we really should convince the customer that they had made a mistake and that incorporate those missing components because morally, we had to give them a complete solution. So once again, it comes down to how would you raise these concerns to, say, your father or some other person in authority? Let's move ahead. So just a little bit of context for you before we go ahead. So we're talking about lawful orders and instructions. Okay, so if someone tells you to do something that's illegal, immoral, or abusive, you don't have to agree. In fact, you're obligated to say no and refuse those kind of situations. It's assumed that there's a limited time for discussion or debate available to you. It's not that there's no time and you have to run with it. The shortage of time, however, still doesn't justify doing unlawful, immoral, or abusive things. So keep that in mind. In the most extreme response, you can always turn around and just resign. But let's look at less extreme situations. Let's avoid those kind of ones. So the 5 scenarios we want to look at are fairly simple. First one is the boss has issued direction to you face-to-face, privately, or over the phone, or some sort of forum where it's just you and that boss. Then there's the other one where the boss has issued direction and has invited feedback, either during a meeting, presentation, or forum. So there's a few other people there, and they would like your feedback. There could be the boss has issued direction but not invited feedback. Once again, in a relatively closed meeting, presentation, or forum. And then the boss has issued direction in an open forum like a town hall or some sort of public meeting. And then lastly, the boss has issued direction via some sort of static means like an email, SOP, policy statement, what have you. So a couple things to consider before you start running around saying no. Not all bosses are open to criticism or input. They think they are the smartest person in the room. That can be a bit of a problem. Ask yourself, does it really matter, this particular situation and what the boss has asked for and that you don't agree with? Will you be required to fix it either way? Who will be held responsible for the original decision and for not fixing it in the first place? And then lastly, it may not be worth inviting the aggravation, conflict, potential hostility, what have you, if there's limited impact on the return on investment for correcting it. Maybe it's worthwhile just going ahead with the wrong decision, seeing what lessons learned come from that. So let's talk about the scenario where the boss has issued direction face-to-face privately. So has the boss invited any feedback is the first thing you have to ask yourself. If yes, run with it. Give him or her the feedback that they're looking for. No, then ask if they would entertain a discussion or questions about the decision. It may be that you just don't quite fully understand the why behind what they've decided to do. Remember, there may be factors that you're not quite aware of, and this is one of the reasons why you want to try and pull information from the boss to better understand, especially because if the, as they say, the excrement hits the fan, then by knowing what the boss intended in the first place as more than just simply do this, but do this because, then it might make it easier for you to apply countermeasures if things start to go wrong. It may not have occurred to them that there could be other solutions, or there may be problems that they haven't considered. And once again, having that dialogue, if they're up to it, if time is available, could be quite valuable insight for everybody. Be polite. Always, always be polite. It sounds silly, but a lot of people come across very negatively when they bring a point up. And it doesn't hurt to add, with all due respect, sir, or all due respect, ma'am, I'm not quite sure I understand this, or I'm not sure I like this idea. Do you have a moment to discuss it? Make sure that you sound as though you really are sincere about finding out the why behind their decision and whether or not there could be another option. And once again, short of an illegal or a moral situation, the final decision always rests with the boss. And even if you have to tell them that, look, you get the final word, but I'd like to suggest something, just in case maybe there's a better idea. And it doesn't hurt to say these things to the boss. So maybe the boss has issued direction and has invited feedback during a meeting. So it's not just you and the boss, but a few people. How do you handle this kind of situation? Well, once again, first rule is still there. Be polite, because you're challenging your boss in front of other people. You're potentially undermining them. Second rule, not to embarrass the boss. Look, you joker, you forgot, X, Y, Z, can't do this. This is why. No, be polite and don't embarrass them. Maybe say, were you aware that this doesn't do this? Or were you aware that this capability no longer exists in the system? If you need to, ask for a private discussion after the meeting to avoid the embarrassment. Always try to come to the boss with an alternative solution in hand, not just opposition. Sometimes you don't have that alternative solution and you really need to tunnel down on what the boss has asked for. But it's best if you can to try and have alternatives so that you're not always seen as negative or oppositional. So let's look at the situation now where the boss has issued direction but has not invited feedback. Not dramatically different than our previous scenario. Let's assume that we still have time that we could talk about it, although the boss may You may want to push on ahead quickly. Remember the first two rules, of course. Polite, don't embarrass the boss. And if you don't think it would be too confrontational, ask if they're open to questions and possibly alternatives. If it would be confrontational to bring it up in that forum, then you take the boss aside afterwards and say, could we have a private discussion after this meeting? Always try to bring those alternatives, right? Keep them in hand. So what if the boss has issued direction in an open or public forum, say like a town hall? Well, a public forum is not always a friendly forum. The boss may have political rivals. Those rivals could be looking for opportunities to hurt them or take things away from them. So almost always it's best to wait for a private discussion after the meeting. You don't want to undermine the boss publicly. Don't give his rivals ammunition to use against him or her. That went by quick, sorry. The boss has issued direction via static forum. How do you handle those scenarios? Well, it's almost always best to try to meet face to face or through some sort of dynamic interchange, use the telephone and be able to discuss it, so avoid further miscommunication. Text is one of our worst tools for communicating. We have the richness of text when we write well, but it's also quite likely that the wrong choice of words or misuse of words could result in confusion and miscommunication. So, like I say, phone, video conference, other tools like that. If you resort to text, try to defer the details until you can speak directly to each other. Instead, set it up as an invitation. For instance, I have some concerns about your latest overtime policy. May I bring them to you over lunch? I'll buy. I'm not saying you have to always buy, but the idea is that you say that, look, I have a concern with policy X, and I want to talk to you about them, and set up that bridge so that you can have that dynamic dialogue. Keep in mind when you do this, is it worth it? You've got to ask yourself that. Not all bosses are open to being challenged. It may cost you your job. However, you might be okay with that. And once again, in a legal or a moral situation, it's essential that you come forward and say no. The old adage of just, I was only following orders, as done by General Kegel, if I remember correctly, in Nazi Germany, following every immoral and heinous order that Hitler ever gave, in the end still got him executed because he committed war crimes. And well, I'm not suggesting anyone's committing war crimes here. The simple fact is you can't just say you're following orders if it's something illegal. Some leaders and organizations do value outside the box and fresh thinking, so they may not mind you challenging them, maybe not continuously, but when the time seems right and with the right circumstance. You yourself may have a personal need to do the right thing always. You can't pass a fault. You can't pass something you don't agree with. By all means, do that, but keep in mind, once again, you may get a reputation for being difficult, or alternatively, you may just wind up being considered an administrative burden and released from further duties with your company. And this concludes our presentation on how to respectfully say no to the boss when you receive direction that you can't agree with or don't agree with. Do you need training materials for your organization? Ready Academy can take your existing training content, breathe new life into it as either online videos and or self-paced computer-based training, including testing. Take some of the pain out of your annual refresher training. Everyone trains and tests when they need to or when they're available, as opposed to having to be all marshaled together in one big group. Need something new? No problem. We'll build it with you and make sure that it's tailored for your particular environment. Our services include recorded presentations, self-paced or timed computer-based training with grading as well, testing and scoring, interactive media, and powerful PowerPoint packages with multimedia that you can use. Also online surveys, which can be valuable not just for your employees, but also for dealing with your clients. Once again, thank you for taking this presentation, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in the near future.